suppose at this point I should probably comment upon Kenneth Branagh. I was very surprised. I was very surprised by Kenneth Branagh. Because I grew up watching Much Ado About Nothing and Hamlet, and I've seen a bunch of other stuff that he's been in and directed. And one of the reasons I went to see the show was because I wanted to see what he was like in person. And I was surprised that he was not the aspect that stole the show for me. In a way, this was very baffling to me. I mean, maybe my expectations were just too high because it was Kenneth Branagh. But I know Kenneth Branagh knows his Shakespeare. And I know that he knows what he's saying. And I wonder whether what I'm going to describe is a symptom of presenting the show without an intermission, trying to cut it down to a manageable length without an intermission. Because I did feel that the show seemed rushed at points. And the portrayal of Macbeth that he went with was a very rapid interior monologue, sort of spiraling neurotic anxiety, which manifested in a speeding through of his lines a lot. And initially that seemed to be all right. But the further through the play we got, there was this sort of sing-songy vocal pattern that he fell into. Yes. Whiny cat. A sing-songy vocal pattern that characterized this rapid presentation of the text. And as the play went on, I found myself listening more to that than to the actual words. And though the ultimate meaning of the speeches I still mostly got, I ended up being distracted by what was going on over here, even though there was nothing going on over there, really, or just listening to the rhythm instead of what he was actually saying, and ultimately being like, oh, that was that part of the scene. It was like an uncomfortableness with taking space and letting the text breathe in silence. No. And the times when he did slow down, then it would be like, and started to work very well. It was like, then it was like I could not look away. But then he'd ramp up again, and all of that would just sort of fall away. It was like there were these amazing effects that would start building an atmosphere, and that's what it is. There was the metaphorical parts of the play that sometimes seemed to be doing a tug of war with the more realistic aspects. And like all this ambiance and emotion and presence would build up and build up and build up, and then something, then like it would be like a light switch would turn off and like switch into this now, and depending on what type of scene it was, it may or may not be, it did or did not manage to carry that presence through. And for me, this sing-songy pattern, by the end of the play, was just like chopping that off really quickly for me. I mean, maybe it worked for other people. This is just my opinion, but I really liked when that was happening. So every time it got broken by something, I would be like, darn it. Which brings me to something else that I loved. I absolutely loved. One of the changes between the space, with their use of the space, there was the moor, the replica of Stonehenge, where in the broadcast there were 3 windows and a door, the door into the church. It let you see out into that moor, this huge space that you'd walked through as you came in. And there were just so many possibilities with that. When the army was approaching with the leafy shields, it was just the way that those came out of the mist behind Stonehenge, approaching. It just started building up this sense of massive impending doom. And I flashed back to Kurosawa's Throne of Blood, with the branches waving through the mist, seen through the battlements of this entire forest, approaching, like as these were coming through we're approaching, visible through the stones of Stonehenge, the swaying of the leafy shields, the branch shields that I didn't actually see any leaves. That was working really, really well. That could have been drawn out twice as long. And this is where my arrogance, I will comment on what I think would have been even awesomer. If you take the ensemble and augment the numbers of those people back there, so that when the people who had the shields came through, who had been creating that impression of the massive army, when they came through, for me, when that happened, that army, that presence just started to like, just plummet like that. If you'd augmented their numbers with the ensemble and had them keep that up until they were told to put down, and then I don't know where the personnel resources were distributed at that point in the show, but that would have really brought out this huge, surrounded, no way that anybody's possibly going to get out of this alive sort of feeling, and would have lent that aspect to that final scene where Lady Macbeth commits suicide, and why so much faith is having to be put in this prophecy, because otherwise this massive wave is just going to crush everything. And for me, between the people coming in and those images suddenly fading away, between that and then the sing-song that then happened, that massive presence that I was just ready to like, oh, come on, crush me. it went, and I was just like, no, but come come on, keep going, keep going. So I loved watching this show. I mean, even though I'm criticizing it, I'm criticizing parts of it because I loved it so much. And that's the type of theater that I want to make. I don't know how I'm going to do it yet, where I'm going to do it, who I'm going to do it with, but that's the type of thing that I love doing in the past and that I want to be involved in. And it was so cool to be able to see that. And yeah, I'm not sure if there was anything else that I was going to comment on or talk about. I'm looking at people's faces to try to remember whether there was something else. But yeah, Richard Coyle did a really good job. Tom Goodwin did a really good job. The witches. Where are the witches? What are the names of the witches? The Weird Sisters, that's what they're called. Charlie Cameron, Laura Ellsworthy, and Anjana Basin? I don't know. Those 5 were the highlights of the show for me. Although there was something that I'd been looking for. There was something that I'd been looking for. When I saw the broadcast, what's his name? Signed my folio. Talk briefly. Is that the right face? Yes. Alexander Vlahos. Assuming, I apologize if I pronounced your name wrong. When I saw the broadcast, it was Malcolm. There was a really interesting sort of twisted maybe this was my imagination. I mean, it was almost a year ago when I saw the broadcast. Almost manipulative cunning in the speech where he first disparages himself and then repents. And in the broadcast, I really like that. So I was looking for that. And that didn't seem to come through for me with this one. I mean, maybe they decided to change that concept with the shift, because I mean, there's a long time between the initial production and this. So I'm very curious about that. So that's the thing, I watch a show and I end up with 1,000 questions, and then I have nobody that can answer the questions, because then I go back to New Hampshire, and I'm like, oh, all these people are scattered across, who knows doing where there. But, yeah. So, I hope people enjoyed this, and thank you. I followed the 7 hours of waiting in line up with an additional several hours of waiting in line to try to get people to sign my folio. And I managed to get a large number of people. I have no idea how many people I missed. I haven't actually counted the signatures, but I think somebody told me that there's like between the named characters and the ensemble, that there's something like 55 people. I think I've got more than half of them. But they were very, very nice to sign my folio after I waited excessively and just sort of like sat there. There were people ordering pizza on the steps of the Armory. It's sort of amusing when you get a group of people waiting for something like this. I I find watching the dynamic of the different levels of excitement, how they interact with each other, feed off of each other, and manifest. In some ways it can be a little scary. Like, I didn't realize that it actually happened in real life where someone will go off excitedly and peer around a corner, and then a stampede will happen. I was like, wait, whoa, seriously? That happens in real life? Oh my God. That was disturbing. I stayed where I was. People came back slowly, some of them. Like, yeah, we saw Alex Kingston drive off in a taxi for 5 seconds. And I was like, cool. I got 5 signatures while you were doing that. Congratulations, Alex. You were a brilliant decoy. I mean, it makes you wonder whether actors plan that when they have someone, when they know that there's people outside waiting to mob them, whether they'll like ask somebody to go, hey, will you go out the side door like a decoy to draw them off? I don't know if that actually happened, but I wonder sometimes. I mean, that's the sort of thing that I would like conspire to do. But yeah, so that happened. People ordering pizza and having it delivered to the steps of the armory, that happened. That was less creepy than the running and the squealing. And then people just sort of vanished. And I was the last one left. And people were trickling out. And I guess the World Cup game ended. I don't follow any sports pretty much. So I didn't even know there was one going on until people were just like, yeah, they're watching the World Cup in there. There's not going to be people out for a while. But I stayed. Eventually the cup ended. More people came out. And everybody was very nice and pleasant. And I really enjoyed being able to talk to people, however briefly. And eventually I went in, asked at the security station, is there anybody left up there so that I'm not waiting for a non-existent person to come down? And he said that he thought they were all gone, so then I went and got my own food, and then my sister came back and I got to gush at her. So, thank you, wonderful cast of Macbeth at the Park Avenue Armory, and hopefully I'll see some of you in some other show again sometime.